Val Kilmer, forever Iceman in Top Gun, a blistering Jim Morrison in The Doors, and the shadowed vigilante in Batman Forever, was never just a movie star. He moved through Hollywood like weather, intense, unpredictable, unforgettable. His stare could cut like steel. His voice once rang with orchestral power, and his craft burned bright enough to stamp roles into memory for millions. For a time he seemed to stand above it all, brilliant, unreachable, almost eternal. But now, at 65, the fire feels dimmed, and what remains is a deep quiet, heavier than the loudest standing ovation. In that quiet sits pain, private, suffocating, and hard to name. It's the kind of darkness that makes even legends feel small and alone. If your heart aches for Val Kilmer, let a single like be a candle, an honest tribute to a light you hope never goes out. As applause faded, Kilmer was pulled back to the first fractures, his childhood in Los Angeles, where family turmoil and early loss shaped him for decades. Born in 1959, he was the middle of three boys, older brother Mark himself, and younger brother Wesley, whose epilepsy hung over the family. On the surface there was warmth, his father Eugene busy in real estate, his mother Gladys offering steady love, a home that laughed easily. But beneath, small cracks widened into quiet loneliness. When he was 9, his parents divorced, and the boys stayed with their father. The distance between Val and Eugene felt wide. "I became quiet, thoughtful, withdrawn," he later said, words that sound like a child trying to carry adult grief. The second blow came less than a decade later. Just as Val was preparing to leave for the Juilliard School in New York, his closest companion, Wesley, full of creativity and plans, suffered a seizure and drowned in the family pool. Val was 17. "It took me 2, maybe 3 years to feel grounded again," he admitted. The loss opened a hollow that never fully closed. From then on, every success, every performance was measured against that early brush with mortality. Acting became sanctuary. At 12, he stepped into his first class, not as a carefree kid, but as a boy looking for a place to set his sorrow down. By 16, he had been accepted to Juilliard, becoming one of its youngest students. Even early on, he drew hard lines about truth and work. At 12, he walked out on a hamburger commercial because he didn't believe in the lines. It cost him the job, but it set the tone. He would not fake it for approval. Those early New York years were lean. Tiny parts, cold rehearsal rooms, little sleep, less money. But they built discipline. He channeled the ache into voice and presence, work that would become unmistakable on stage and screen. The price, though, was real. Distance from family, a youth marked by grief, and opportunity shut when he refused to compromise. Late at night, he'd remind himself, "I must keep going. I must not let him be forgotten." It wasn't luck that carried him forward. It was a stubborn devotion to honesty in the work, Hollywood noticed. By the mid-1980s, after Top Secret, and then Top Gun in 1986, the world met Iceman, and Val Kilmer became a symbol overnight. The twist? He'd come into Top Gun reluctantly, tied to a contract and unimpressed by the script. Stardom came anyway, and with it, a lifelong tension. He wanted depth. Hollywood wanted the shine. That conflict would strain his marriage to Joanne. Wally pulled him away from his children when work consumed him and earned him a reputation, brilliant but difficult. In 1991, the Doors demanded everything. Kilmer vanished into Jim Morrison, voice, movement, attitude, until friends and colleagues wondered where Morrison ended and Val began. The performance thrilled audiences and unsettled sets. Oliver Stone later suggested that Val spoke so deeply from within a role that he couldn't always hear how it landed with others. The intensity lifted his art, and it raised walls around his personal life. Trade stories, like a 1996 Entertainment Weekly piece, tagged him as someone who makes enemies, a label that clung. Tombstone in 1993 gave him Doc Holliday, haunted, witty, unforgettable, and won respect across the industry. Batman Forever in 1995 brought a dream role in a rubber suit that muffled everything he loved about acting. He said later, it felt like the costume was performing, not him. Heat in 1995, opposite Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, put him alongside giants and reminded people he belonged there. Love never came easy. In the mid-1980s, he fell for Cher, 13 years his senior and already a superstar. The attraction was real, but their lives were moving targets. Once Cher works her way into your heart, she never leaves, he said. When that relationship faded, he found a new beginning with Joanne Whalley on the 1988 set of Willow. They married that same year. Mercedes arrived in 1991 and Jack in 1995. Between those joys, the work bore down. His full-body immersion for The Doors took him away in ways a family can feel. Rumors, like whispers connecting him to Cindy Crawford in the mid-1990s, went unanswered by Val, but headlines still bite. In 1996, divorce papers reached him on the set of The Island of Dr. Moreau, a moment that felt symbolic. Art and life colliding in the worst way. The career fire kept burning, and so did the clashes. Dr. Moreau became infamous. Director Richard Stanley was replaced by John Frankenheimer. By the end, Frankenheimer said he'd never work with Kilmer again. Kilmer later admitted in Val 2021 that he had behaved badly. Method and perfectionism had costs, friendships frayed, projects soured, and the difficult label hardened. Years later, Daryl Hannah entered his life. At his New Mexico ranch in the early 2000s, they found quiet, sunset light, easy laughter, small kindnesses, everything a battered heart hopes for. When she married Neil Young in 2018, it cut deep. Kilmer called it the most painful love of my life. He was honest about the long drought that followed. I have not had a long-term girlfriend for 20 years, he said. The loneliness was real. That ranch was more than an address. In San Miguel County, near Santa Fe, his spread once stretched to more than 6,000 acres. It was a place to write. He worked there on projects like Cinema Twain and other personal pieces, to think, to breathe. But practical life intruded. By 2006, IRS debts were reported. In 2011, he sold more than 5,000 acres for roughly $18.5 million, leaving about 160 acres. He tried opening the property as a bed and breakfast. Neighbors pushed back overuse and traffic. What had been a refuge turned complicated. He later spoke of a favorite photo with his father on that land, a reminder that even our sanctuaries are fragile. Then came the health battle that changed everything. Around 2014, Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer. For a man whose voice had carried entire lives, Morrison's poetry, Iceman's bite, the threat was devastating. 2 tracheostomies, radiation, chemotherapy, a feeding tube, long stretches, where words wouldn't come at all. Raised in Christian Science, he struggled with the decision to accept medical treatment until Mercedes and Jack insisted. He listened. Still, the silence was hard. He wrote. He painted. He filmed. Val 2021 wove home movies and new footage into an intimate record of a private fight. The goal wasn't pity. It was connection and truth. In 2022, at 61, he returned to Top Gun: Maverick for a brief scene that carried a lifetime. Director Joseph Kosinski and Tom Cruise worked to bring him back as Iceman, with AI carefully reconstructing the familiar timbre from decades of recordings so that a broken voice could speak once more. The exchange with Maverick was short, but it landed. For audiences, it felt like a miracle. For Cruise, it was essential, a moment built on friendship and film history. Kilmer's presence said what words couldn't. I'm still here. In his later years, Kilmer moved between the remaining 160 acres in New Mexico and Los Angeles for treatment. The tabloids speculated about money, estimates between $10 and $25 million came and went. But what mattered to him most were the journals, paintings, and hundreds of hours of footage he'd preserved. He put his archives in his children's hands. He kept creating even when speech failed. In his notebook at 63, he wrote, "I was once all thunder, all voice, now paper must speak. For me." He kept working in small, surprising ways. A one-man Twain piece, cinema Twain, art shows, occasional glimpses online. Just 5 weeks before the end, he posted a short, wordless clip lowering a Batman mask over his face, fragile and defiant at once. It felt like a farewell. On April 1st, 2025, at 65, with pneumonia closing the circle, he pressed Jack's hand, one last clear gesture, and slipped away. It didn't end with fans and cameras. It ended quietly with family at his side, Mercedes and Jack close, the room still. He left the world the way he'd chosen to live his last years, without spectacle, without asking for pity, and without losing his dignity. What stays with us isn't only the work, Top Gun, The Doors, Tombstone, Heat, Batman Forever, or the headlines about clashes and ranches and rumor. It's the whole of him, the boy wounded early who chased truth. The man who gave too much to certain roles and not enough to certain people. The artist who lost his voice and found a new way to speak. The father who made sure his children could tell the story he couldn't finish alone. Some endings are loud. This one was not. And that too was a choice. The greatest battles are often fought in silence. Farewell, Iceman. Goodbye to Batman. Goodbye to Jim Morrison, to Doc Holliday, to every soul you carved into memory. You didn't just play parts, you left a vibration time won't erase. If he ever made you laugh, cry, or believe, if the quiet now moves you more than the roar ever did, leave a memory below. Tap like so others find their way to this story, and add your own goodbye to any.